Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Mare of Easttown. Oh my goodness, let's talk about it. So Mare of Easttown is a HBO series that was created by Brad Inglesby and was also written by him. And each of the episodes were directed by Craig Zobel. And of course, the series stars the incredible, the formidable Kate Winslet. Now listen, I already talked about how I was watching this series in my video talking about what I've been watching these past couple of months and weeks. And I already told you guys the second that finale was gonna drop, we were gonna have words. We were gonna have words because this series has had me hooked week after week. I think this series has done a phenomenal job of captivating us and capturing our imagination, our curiosity, our attention as the weeks have gone on. But finally, we managed to see the end of this mini series, the finale to this entire mystery, and lo and behold, they went and did it. They went and did the thing. HBO knew that they had to deliver, and they did the thing. The finale hit all the right spots. I can't believe they stuck the landing. They absolutely did it. They absolutely delivered an incredible finale to what was already an incredible series. So I have some thoughts, okay? But before we delve into my thoughts on the series overall, as well as that phenomenal finale, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's talk about it. So as I mentioned in that video where I was talking about what I've been watching, this series falls under the kind of subgenre of a small town murder, okay? A murder that takes place in a small town. Now, these types of murders, these types of criminal investigations tend to hit harder when it comes to smaller towns and, you know, more tight-knit communities, because everyone knows each other. You know, you walk around the town and you can see just how close everyone is. It's very much a small world there. Everyone grew up together. They go to the same church, and now their kids are growing up together as well. So these kinds of tragedies that take place throughout the series, the murders, the kidnappings, you know, the missing girls, they hit harder when it comes to each of the residents in this town because they know someone, or they know someone who knows someone, because it's such a tight-knit community. And so it's not just the friends and family members of these victims that are affected by this crime, but the entire town. And I think that's why this is kind of a subgenre that we see time and time again, because it does have that different dynamic to a major city where people are largely anonymous, and the only people who are really affected by what happens to the victims there are their close friends and loved ones. But having said that though, that just makes it all the more important for a series to actually set up a community that feels real, that feels authentic. And I think that's one thing that this series does so well. They meticulously created the world of Easttown through, yes, the accents. Yes, of course, the Philadelphian, very specific accent. Okay, the accent work here is brilliant, okay, even though it's been parodied at this point, but it is very specific and it is very well carried out. But then you also have the costuming. You know, it's unassuming. It's not the kind of costuming that you would kind of be in awe of in the way that I was talking about the Cruella costumes. Here you have very downplayed, very regular, average clothes, but we don't realize just how difficult it is to make clothes look average and worn. And that's something that they really worked on. I watched the behind the scenes segment and they were talking about how they wore down the clothes. They poked holes in them to make them feel worn and to make them feel like they've been around for a long time, and that the characters just throw them on as they usually do. And they were, of course, in Philadelphia whilst they were filming, so they were aware of, you know, the residents there and how they dress and how they act and how they move around their community, and they were able to replicate that in the series so well. And I think it's that kind of detail work that really makes all the difference in creating this community, because as I said, that is an important part, an important element of a series like this, that is exploring a murder or exploring these tragedies that take place and affect all of the residents that surround it. Another thing that I touched on when I was previously discussing this series in that video was how I appreciated the fact that even though this is a very difficult time for the community, some horrible things are happening, people are going missing, people are getting murdered. Of course, that's going to create a very somber tone that will be felt throughout the community, as I said, because they are so close-knit. But I appreciate the fact that this series actually allowed us to see the more humorous sides of the residents of Easttown. Like, they actually had a sense of humor, they were able to laugh with one another, even in inappropriate moments, and that's something that, again, I saw in the behind the scenes segment that was very intentionally put there by the writer. And I think it makes all the difference, because again, it helps us to see this community, to see this world as being authentic and realistic, because as human beings, even when you're going through something really difficult and dour and depressing, you are still going to have those moments of levity and laughter, especially with the people that you're closest to, because that kind of helps you cope with the situation. So I think that's really effective as well. It wasn't just about creating this dire tone throughout the entire series, but also showing us the realistic relationships that these residents of Easttown had with one another, especially within the families that are explored here. And I would say with this point in particular, Helen, who's Mare's mother in the series, is absolutely phenomenal. Helen is a goddess. I absolutely love the character of Helen. Again, she was the source of a lot of these humorous moments and these moments of levity. She's a very crass person. She says it as it is, and she's also very much withheld in her emotions. It's something that you can see Mare has inherited from her, this kind of emotional constipation that she has because of the difficulties that she faced when Mare was younger with her husband and his mental illness. We'll talk about that in a second, but I did enjoy those moments where she had that kind of cheekiness, that kind of smartness to her, and again, it just helped with the family dynamic. You get an understanding of everyone's role in their family in that way. And also, speaking of the families, I think another way that this show does a great job of building the world around the murder is by showing us the different circumstances that the families are experiencing at this moment in time. Now, we don't delve into each of these families with a lot of depth because, of course, the story at the end of the day is about Mare and about the murders and the kidnappings and everything. But still, I do think that the series does a good job in showing us, you know, the kind of overall circumstances of each of these families. In the case of some family members, they're dealing with loss, they're dealing with trauma, some are dealing with mental illness, and some are dealing with like physical illnesses in terms of cancer. So everyone is going through their own stuff, basically. But at the same time, because the series is so cleverly written, these issues tend to also have elements to them that reflect the issues that Mare herself is facing. For example, you have that black woman who has that brother who's a drug addict. That's something that Mare can relate to because of the plight of her own son, who also suffered from drug abuse. And then, of course, when it came to the finale, we'll talk about that in a second, don't even worry about it. But when it came to the finale with Laurie, I do feel like it was intentional to have that kind of connection of Laurie losing her son when it turns out that he was the one who killed Erin, but Laurie ended up losing her son, which was a nice parallel to how Mare lost her son, except in this time it was because of his own suicide. So I do think that there are some intentional parallels when it comes to what's happening with each of these families, whilst at the same time it feeling quite realistic for these families to have these struggles that they're going through. Okay, so we've talked about the world overall and the community that's been set up here and how well it's been written and how well it's been actualized. Now let's get on to the mystery. Now let's get on to what kept us captivated on a weekly basis, the mystery of who killed Erin. Now, there were a lot of plot twists and turns. Okay, my neck was kind of aching from all the twisting and turning we were doing week after week, but we finally got there. And can I just say, I did not see this coming, okay? Not only did I not see this coming, but I was also so impressed to see how, you know, when the big reveal does come and we find out that it was actually Laurie's son who killed Erin, it does make sense. And that is the impressive part. It's not just having a big plot twist for the sake of having a big plot twist to surprise the audience. It's about the plot twist actually being surprising, but also also making sense when you follow the tracks that came before it. Like, it actually makes sense when you see the behavior of the kid, when you see how he was interacting with his mum that day, and when she asked him whether their father was having an affair. It just made sense, and I was so impressed by how they managed to lay down those crumbs whilst at the same time obscuring the truth and giving us a lot of diversions and distractions to get distracted by before we reach this finale, so that it would have the best emotional impact. And then of course when we did reach that conclusion and we find out that it was Laurie's son, the pain and emotion, these actresses were doing their goddamn jobs. These actresses were doing the actoring. First of all, the actress who portrays Laurie, I can't even begin to imagine what that character was going through at that moment, but the actress was giving me a sense of what she was going through. Her performance was so excellent. Her emotions, her emoting was so brilliant. That scene in the car where she literally just has a breakdown because it's just thing after thing after thing. It's bad enough that she thought that her husband was having an affair again with the woman that he had an affair with previously. That was already stressful enough. But then you have the added element of he was having an affair with the girl who ended up dying, okay, with this younger girl that they're related to. Like, so many elements of that is just messed up. But then you have the added element of her son found out, and the big secret that he was made to keep wasn't that it was an affair, but rather that he ended up killing that girl in retaliation. Just one thing after the other, and I think the actress did a great job of conveying all of the emotions that would involve. Speaking of the distractions and diversions, I think that's another thing that the series does exceptionally well, because throughout this series we follow several different kinds of mysteries. There are several kind of red herrings that are placed very strategically, but at the same time, again, they're not just there for the sake of being there. They actually make sense. We have, of course, the priest guy, which at first you're like, okay, a young girl is involved and so is a priest, so he did it. Like, you see him dump the bike and you're like, oh, it's the priest. Of course it's the priest. Of course he was being inappropriate with this young girl. But then you find out about these other girls who have gone missing and, you know, what happened to them. That doesn't really explain everything. But then you're taken on this detour to this other mystery, and that whole detour culminates in episode 5, where we finally get to the house where the girls were being kept. That episode was so tense. The tension there was just unbelievable, because you're thinking, please let these girls be free. Please let Mare and Zabel save these girls. And that whole scene, that whole sequence played out just so brilliantly. I was so sad that Zabel ended up dying. I was so sad. I was so upset. I was like, no, Evan Peters, why? But again, that whole sequence just perfectly done. The tension there was gripping, but then the girls managed to get out and you have this moment of relief, like the girls have been saved, they've been rescued, but it doesn't solve the whole mystery. There's still something missing. And they do that again with the finale, where for the first 5 minutes you're thinking that it's Billy who ended up killing Erin because of his inappropriate relationship with her, but then it turns out that it was John. It turns out that it was the other brother who had an inappropriate relationship with this child. And then you have another moment of tension where Mara's just watching the brothers as they interact by the river, and John is holding the gun to Billy's head, and he was willing to allow his brother to take the fall for it all. And it kind of makes sense now looking back. Again, the breadcrumbs were there, because of course he would do that for his son. Like, of course he would rather his brother go to prison as opposed to his child. So it all makes sense, but that interaction was just, again, so full of tension. And then of course you get that twist that it turns out that it was John who had the relationship with Erin as opposed to Billy, and Mare finds this out directly, like on her own, despite the fact that the police captain was eager to get her this information but didn't manage to in time. You have that tussle in the river, and then ultimately John ends up getting arrested, and you think all is done and dusted in the half an hour that all of that took. You're like, okay, it's been half an hour, I guess we're just gonna chill for the rest of the 45 minutes or so. But no, they weren't done. They weren't done, because things aren't adding up here and there. Like, you have Mare, you know, going out to eat, and she sees the woman who John was supposed to be having an affair with, and she tries to confront her, but the woman's like, sis, like, I don't know what you're talking about. That was 5 years ago. And Mare's like, no, you've been doing it again. And it turns out that that's wrong. So like, what's going on there? And then of course she gets the call from that old man who had an affair with Helen. He ends up telling her that his gun went missing for a short period of time, but ended up being returned. And that's when you have that big kind of clue. That's when Mare's kind of light bulb moment happens, and she realizes that they have the wrong man in prison right now for the death of Erin. And that whole sequence of events, the way that it unfolded in this season finale, was just masterfully done. And we cannot go any further into this review without mentioning just how incredible Kate Winslet was in this role. She was absolutely phenomenal because she had to balance out this character who was so focused on this case and this investigation. She was also incredibly clever. You could tell that in another environment, in another city, she would have been so much more far ahead when it comes to her career. But at the same time, as the therapist reveals, she is suffering from a lot of trauma and unresolved trauma from the death of her son, who had mental health issues and ended up turning to drug abuse and ended up taking his own life in her own house. And that saw the breakdown of her relationship, her marriage, her relationship with her family members, including her daughter who found her brother during that time. And so yeah, this character is just so layered. This character is just so incredible, and you can see Kate Winslet doing such an incredible job of trying to keep all of those emotions that are literally right beneath the surface in check, because once again, she has inherited that kind of harshness, that hardness, in order to survive from her mother, who also had to deal with her husband who had mental health issues. So it is just such an incredibly written character who is just incredibly actualized and realized by Kate Winslet. But as great as Kate Winslet is in this role, I have to say she is very much supported by an incredible cast just overall. I think everyone gave incredible performances in this series, and it made all the difference when it came to having that familial connection in order to set up a world that is a tight-knit community. As I mentioned, that's also very important when you're trying to depict how each and every person in this tight-knit community is affected by these horrible crimes. But as truly phenomenal and fantastic as this series really is, there were a few elements of the series that I don't know, I feel like they were less than perfect, okay? First of all, the love stories, okay? So Guy Pearce is in the series. Guy Pearce is on this show, and you know, I think the character of Richard was nice. I think he was necessary, as with the character of Zabel and his affection and attraction towards Mare. I do think that was necessary to have in there, because it allows Mare to finally kind of play with the idea, entertain with the idea of finding love again, because this is a character who has gone through so much trauma, so much loss. She's basically thrown herself in her work. That's where she kind of values her skills the most. That's when she feels useful, is when she's, you know, helping and investigating. But her love life at this point is basically non-existent, and even her husband has been able to move on. He is getting married to another woman. We'll talk about that in a second. And it shows just how, you know, other people are starting to move on, and it would really be great if she could also put herself out there and find someone else that loves her and appreciates her in that way, in a way that, you know, her other family members and friends can't really offer her. And so I think Richard plays that role really well. I also think Zabel kind of added this other element of, you know, him being a younger man who was pursuing someone who is older than him, an older woman. That's something that we rarely see. First of all, it's usually the other way around, where it's a young woman with an older man, as we can see just from this series. And again, it's just kind of emphasizing the idea that Mare is considered attractive and desirable to people, even if she doesn't realize it, because of the mental state and everything that she's going through in her personal life. So I do think that Zabel and that kind of love triangle that they had with Richard was important in establishing that. But I don't think that the romances themselves had a lot of space to be fully explored. Like I think that they kind of skipped through, especially her relationship with Richard, kind of tried to wrap it up with a neat bow, and then in the end he ends up going off to somewhere and it's like, okay, I guess he's off now. I don't know why he needed to leave. Like, why couldn't he stay behind? It's not like we were rearing up for a second season, perhaps. But yeah, I personally didn't understand why they couldn't just have a happily ever after where Richard just stuck around. Anyway, circling back to Mare's ex-husband and his relationship with his fiance, that was also something that felt a little bit unnecessary, especially at the end there, where they seem to have, you know, problems because of everything that's happened. And at one time, Mare even suspects her ex-husband of having had a child with Erin and having had an affair with Erin, and that turns out to not be the case, but it's something that very much disrupts her ex-husband's relationship with his current fiance. So that's kind of a turbulent time in their relationship that kind of gets resolved off screen just kind of magically, again, to kind of close things off and wrap it up with a neat bow. I didn't really feel a lot of satisfaction seeing them get married at the end, because it's not really a storyline that we followed with a lot of, you know, depth, and so we weren't really invested in that side of things. When it comes to Mare's custody battle that she faced over her grandson, I do think that was a very interesting storyline. Again, you see that Mare is still struggling over the repercussions, the fallout from her son's suicide. It's still something that plays a role in her life because he left behind a son, her grandson, and now his former partner is, you know, trying to fight her over custody over their son. And it's something that, again, is weighing on her because it's bringing out all of these old emotions that she hasn't fully dealt with, and she's really struggling with this whole situation on top of everything else that she's facing. And so I do think that that aspect of the story was done particularly well. But one thing that again happened off screen and didn't have as much of an impact as it should have was the mother relapsing. We got a hint to that when we see her working really hard trying to earn some money, and she ends up working night shifts and day shifts, and it makes her exhausted, and so she turns to drugs that her friends offer her in order to stay awake. And at one instance you see that they're having bath time with the kid, and she ends up falling asleep and he almost drowns, I guess. Like, he's playing a game and he almost drowns in the bathtub. And so you can see that that's where her story was leading up to. But then all of a sudden, because of everything else that goes on with the, you know, mystery surrounding Erin's death, we don't really get a full resolution of what happens there. Next time they go back to the issue, we just see Mare and her mother sitting in a courtroom waiting for the mum to show up for mediation, and she doesn't end up showing up to the meeting. She's downstairs and Mare has that interaction with her where she admits that she's fallen back on the drugs and she's relapsed, and so she has to sign herself up to a facility and she won't be able to take care of her child, so she relinquishes that, you know, custody battle. So ultimately it is a happy ending for Mare and for her family, and in particular for her grandson, because of course it seems as though she's more equipped to take care of him than his mother is. But a lot of that happened off screen at the end there that we could have seen play out a little bit more. And the same can kind of be said when it comes to Mare's relationship with Siobhan. Now Siobhan, as I mentioned before, was the one who found her brother when he committed suicide, and so it was a very traumatic moment for her, and I wish the series delved a little bit more into what she experienced, someone who, you know, had to see that, something so shocking that it really stayed with her. We do see her working on this media project where she gathers, you know, some footage of her brother, and she's, you know, trying to come to terms with what happened to him. That's sort of her method of therapy. But then you have this like big breakout fight that happens between Mare and Siobhan, where Siobhan tells her exactly what she's wanted to say but hasn't been able to, and because she's under the influence, all of those filters are kind of broken down. She's able to say exactly what she wanted and how much she blames her mother because she was the one who found her brother as opposed to her mother finding him. But again, we don't really get a moment where that's fully addressed. The problem is kind of brought up and then it's kind of left to just sit to marinate for a while before in the end we see that Siobhan is headed off to Berkeley University, and that's great for her. It means that she can start a whole different life for herself, perhaps get out of that small town that she thought she was going to be trapped in because of her family. But ultimately there are a lot of still unresolved issues between the mum and the daughter, and that's something that we didn't really see be attempted to kind of get a resolution for. But overall, overall, what can I say? This series did exactly what it needed to do. It kept us captivated week after week with these mysteries, with all of these detours and these distractions and red herrings. And then when the conclusion finally came, it all felt very satisfying. It felt like it made sense. You know, there were big plot twists, there were surprises, but they had all been seeded in masterfully throughout the series that when they do come, you are surprised, but it doesn't feel like it came absolutely out of nowhere. And so in that way, not only did they manage to create this mystery and this world, but they actually managed to stick the landing, which is even more impressive. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Mare of Easttown a 9 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Mare of Easttown, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this incredible series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.